All right, welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Paul from Lehigh PD in Utah. He is second generation police officer. His dad served 37 years in Pleasant Grove. He is currently the chief of police with Lehigh PD and has been with Lehigh in law enforcement for 32 years, but chief of police for 11 years now. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, Chief Paul. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Paige. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the work you do on this important topic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was looking at, kind of our initial conversation in your bio, and 32 years is obviously a long time to be in law enforcement, but 11 years is also a really long time to be chief of police. So I'm really interested in, obviously any background that you want to share, but how do you, as a leader, prioritize yourself, especially the fact that you've been in leadership for so long? Do you have a secret sauce or anything that has helped you along the way to manage?
I think the key to longevity for me has been good mentors and learning from good leaders, and I guess that would begin with my father, which is actually the reason that I'm in law enforcement. As a young man and as a little boy, watching him as a police officer serve his community, and also in the days before cell phones and stuff, I remember people showing up at our house or calling our landline phone and just asking questions or asking for help. And it really could be about anything. And I remember watching him help people. And I think that's what kind of drew me into the profession, was watching him and getting advice and words of wisdom from him. And then since that time, trying to take good advice from other mentors that I've identified over the years.
Mm. Do you think that everyone has the ability to lead by example and to be someone that can inspire other people?
I think so, if you're genuine and
Yeah.
you're doing the right things for the right reason. I think that if you believe in your profession, or if you believe in your cause and the things you're doing and you're genuine about it, I think people can see that, and it's easy to follow someone like that.
I agree. And, sometimes I think we all have moments or times in our life where we have this kind of self assessment of, am I doing the right things? Am I doing good things? Am I as effective as I could be? Or at least I would hope that everyone kind of has those moments of self reflection. And there's been a few times in my life where um, I've had to ask myself, am I doing things that could how do I want to word this? Because I don't want it to come off as like I'm doing things because I think that I want to, um, impact someone's life, but am I doing things that I think people could look up to? Am I setting that example for other people? Am I doing things that are worthy of other people wanting to strive to do those things too? And I do think that you're right. It has to be genuine, but I think that we can all sometimes ask ourselves those questions. Am I leading with good examples?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's always good to self-assess where you're at, and also acknowledge your own vulnerabilities or your own shortcomings, and then look for people that can help you, build character and build strength. So,
I did want to touch on that too, because I think that the biggest flex, I'll say flex, maybe the young kids are listening to it, but it's a strength to understand, where your opportunities of growth are, and then being willing to take the steps to improve yourself. And we can learn something from everyone. I really believe that. I really believe that whether someone's doing something really good or something really bad, we can learn from all of it, and we can learn from people from different walks of life. It doesn't have to be someone who's a direct mentor or leader of yours, although that's helpful. I think we can learn from everybody, but we have to have the open mind to first say, there's an area where I feel like I can improve, but then also the willingness to absorb that information from other people as well. And you said that earlier. You're like, I was looking for people who could help me to be better. And I think it's such a positive mindset to have of how can I continue to evolve and learn and grow.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I learned pretty early on, and probably at the advice of my dad, was to be proactive in your career, you know, and take opportunities to grow and stretch and learn, even if it's maybe takes you outside of your comfort zone, but just being willing to experience things and gain that kind of perspective and realize that you're not always going to get it right every time, but you can always learn something.
Yeah, I love that word to stretch. That was really powerful to me because I visualized that of you kind of like you said, stepping out of a comfort zone and trying to challenge maybe the boundaries that sometimes we set for ourselves. Like, how can we step out of that? And how can we? And I want to outgrow myself. And I think even today, you said, you don't get it right all the time. I try to look at failures as growth opportunities too, and I think that if we can look at it, it's not a zero sum game. We're going to have successes, we're going to have failures, but we can learn and we can grow from all of it.
Yeah, and going back to being genuine, I think people can accept that if you're honest about it, and if you're willing to say, "Hey, I made a mistake here, or I could have done better here, or this experience taught me this." You know, if you can have those kind of conversations, I think people understand that we're all human.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, if someone stands up and says, "Hey, that was on me," and I'm gonna do better next time, or "Hey, like I recognize that that was my bad." I also think that sometimes we have to, on the other side of it, have a little bit of that empathy towards other people too, of like understanding that if someone does make a mistake and they do own up to it, or they do recognize that and they're taking those steps to improve themselves, that we're also meeting them with a level of understanding. I think sometimes we're really quick to judgment, and I've done this too before, where someone has done that, and I'm like, like and I think that we have to recognize, if someone is going to do that, how can we meet them with a little bit of grace too?
Yeah, I think that's important, and I'll also say most most of the people that I've come across or worked with in our organization and even in our community, their intentions are they're well intended, and so sometimes they might make a mistake, but they're doing it with hopes of doing the right thing. And so I think we can recognize that too.
Mhm.
Maybe help them course correct slightly, but also acknowledge that the good that they're trying to accomplish.
You're hitting me a little bit on a personal note because, and maybe anyone who's listening to this can relate to this too, but um, I think about like relationships, right? And my partner was like, every time like he would make a mistake, he would be like, "You have to know my intentions." Like I wasn't trying to be mean, or I wasn't trying to hurt your feelings. My intentions were really good. They weren't malicious, right? And I think the level of like understanding that we have for people in our lives when they come up to us and they say that, and like we know that their intentions were good, how would we treat that person? We'd be like, okay, like I understand. Maybe it still stings. Like maybe sometimes you're like, man, that still like, was annoying, or maybe that still like hurt my feelings or whatever it was. But I think that if we can say, okay, what were the intentions behind the behavior? Were they good intentions or were they malicious intentions? And then we can kind of differentiate and we can choose how we show up. But I think we do have to have a little bit of that, step back of like, okay, were they trying? And
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
just fell short a little bit.
for sure. And I think we have to acknowledge, where things can improve or whatever. But I do think we have to try to see from their perspective where they are coming from, or where they are genuinely trying. At least I appreciate it when people give me that benefit of the doubt, because I've certainly made mistakes in my time here, and So I just appreciate that. So
100%. Well, I think that because you appreciate that, you try to show up for other people like that too. It's a partnership. I did want to talk a little bit. You said this earlier. You said that earlier in your career, it was really instilled in you through your mentors and your dad to be proactive with efforts, reaching out to people who you want to learn from, being proactive in your career and in your wellness. What, from your perspective, what have you seen as the result of that for people who were proactive in reaching out for these things versus people who weren't?
well, I think people that are proactive can see the goal in front of them and can navigate that a little easier and not leave so much to chance. Just when we interview new officers and we're trying to decide if they're a good fit for our organization, we'll ask them, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And we want them to take a little bit of ownership in their career and set goals. And some officers will have particular goals and that's it. And they won't look past that.
Mm.
And sometimes it takes time to get there. So if you're more willing to expand and look at other opportunities and then kind of be proactive in going after them, talking to the right people, taking opportunities to learn new skills, and so that you don't become so stuck in your day to day and you're able to grow and stretch that way. I think to me, that's what proactive means.
I'm a really big fan of short-term, midterm, and long-term goals. Like if we can kind of dissect it. And this was something that was really hard for me when I was younger. I didn't know, and this was from the experiences I had when I was a kid. I had a hard childhood and the bar was set really low for me. And I didn't know that I could dream. I didn't know that I could set big goals for myself. I just thought that as long as I didn't end up like my parents, that I was good. And like that was really kind of all I could hope for. And so it was something I had to really work on in my life is how can I dream bigger? How can I look towards the future in a different way rather than just trying to like survive day to day? And now I recognize the impact of being able to set those short-term, midterm, and long-term goals, because I think it really helps you to get through some of that burnout phase that we all are going to have. And it keeps you on a trajectory. We know that these are the things that we are working towards. And then it also allows us, I think, to be able to backtrack a little bit. So, for example, like maybe your goal, long term, maybe someone wants to be chief. That's their goal. One day they want to be chief of police. Okay, so that's a long term goal. If you're a younger officer, like we know that that's not going to be tomorrow. If you just started, that's going to be long term. So, what are the steps that you have to take today that are going to help you to get there? And so, I think that it helps us to at least have some sort of path or foundation.
Yeah. So in my case, it was pursuing professional development, which we talked a little bit about. Maybe we'll talk more about, but and that meant getting back into school and earning a bachelor's degree and ultimately a master's degree, and learning the skill set that comes with the opportunity to be in police administration. And when I first started, I didn't necessarily see myself there. That wasn't the goal. The goal was just to get into the profession and help people.
Mhm.
And that's still where I get the most satisfaction, I think. But over time and kind of assessing how things were progressing, I was like, well, these graveyard shifts, I can't do this forever. And I don't want to do some of these tasks I don't want to do forever. So I want to look to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that was schooling for me, and also networking, and also taking on new challenges in the PD. And so
Yeah.
we try real early with the officers to get them to try to look a little more big picture. And some of them, they'll come in and they say, well, I just want to do this, whatever it is. A lot of them want to be involved with SWAT and the tactical side, or canine, or whatever it is. And the trick is to try to get them to think a little bigger, and maybe where do I want to get long term. And then at the same time, it's also helping them be patient, because the flip side is some people want everything right now, right away, and they have to learn their way through too.
Yeah. Patience is a tricky one. I struggle with that myself too. Sometimes, and I actually asked someone recently, and maybe you can relate to this, being chief in administration, but I was like, how do you practice patience when sometimes like you don't have any, like, and whether that's dealing with other people, whether that's, your professional or your personal life. But I also think that we live right now in a time where everything is instant. Like when we were younger, time was slower. Things took longer. We didn't have the technology that we have today. We didn't have the things, the Amazon that shows up at your doorstep sometimes same day. Like those, we were used to waiting longer for things to happen. And now things have sped up so quickly that I think, especially the younger generation who are coming in and used to technology and used to those things, it is harder to have kind of that mentality of, things taking maybe longer than you necessarily want them to. So I struggle with that sometimes too.
Yeah, it can be hard, but I feel like while you're in that waiting phase, you're should be observing things, and really paying attention to what you think works and what doesn't work. And you'll get there eventually. And sometimes it's nice to have the time to lean on mentors and learn from their mistakes and learn from their successes too. So
Yeah.
yeah, we have to tell the officers, slow down a little bit. Your career's a long time. If we're looking at 20 years or whatever, that's a long time. So learn the skills, learn the proficiencies, and make contacts and make connections that will serve you long term. And it's hard because everyone wants what they want right now.
Yeah. Well, I think delayed gratification is important, but I also think craftsmanship is really important. And how can you hone in your craft? How can you get better at what you're currently doing? So that's going to set you up for the next thing. I have had several people reach out to me randomly. And they're, maybe wanting to get into the wellness space, and they're wanting to work with law enforcement. They're like, how do I do what you do? And my answer is not ever really an answer that they like. It's like, you just graduated, I've been doing this for over a decade, so there are things that you have to know and things that you have to do, and there's real life experience that has to happen, and you have to have an understanding of certain things for that to happen, and that takes time. Like I've spent the last decade learning these things, and developing those skills to be able to do what I do today. It's not something where you just, I'll put it in your example, you don't graduate the academy and then the next day you're on the SWAT team, or you don't graduate the academy and the next day you're chief. There's a lot of honing your skills and learning and development and I would also say maturity that has to happen within the career for you to reach those kind of pinnacles that people want, they're striving to get to, not realizing that we all had to take that long journey and path to get there. I think a lot of times we see people at the top and we're like, we want to get there, but we're not maybe understanding. And some people maybe aren't willing to take that journey. And sometimes it's a decade, sometimes it's 2 decades to get there.
Yeah, I think some of the best advice I received as a young officer was to slow down and take the good with the bad. Take the time to learn and grow, and you're going to have ups and downs, and so just try to learn every day something that will be useful to you, and learn from your mistakes, learn from others' mistakes, and find mentors that can reinforce those ideas. Some officers become a little bit jaded, and they become hard to, they're not proactive in their own careers, and they become bitter, or it's not happening on their terms, and they become upset, and then they can really affect the organization poorly. And if you attach yourself to somebody with that mindset, you have to really be careful and watch out for.
Yeah. And I think you can continue to learn in a lot of different ways. I think there's a lot of confidence that comes with continued education. I know you talked about professional development and the things that you have to do. Like um, I have been my most negative in times of stagnation. Like I will notice it. Like when I'm just like in the day-to-day grind, I'm not really working on developing myself. I'm not listening to podcasts. I'm not reading. I'm not doing these things that I know are good for me to continue my evolution and my growth within my profession. That's when I feel like I have the least amount of energy. I'm the most negative. And so I think that it really is, and we talked about this, it's part of wellness. How can you continue to develop yourself both personally and professionally and get through some of those hard times and then come out the other end better. And I think that there's a lot of simple ways that we can do this. I started, I told myself, and this was recently, I was like, you know what, I want a better morning routine. I want to get up and do certain things so that I feel better every day. And that meant getting up a little bit earlier, but I was like, I don't want to start my day reading emails anymore. I don't think that that's good for my mental health to wake up to 150 emails and like start my day immediately. So what I said is, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to take my cup of coffee and I'm going to take my book that I'm reading at this time and I'm going to read just a couple pages, like 2 pages, 3 pages, drink my coffee. Then I start the day feeling like I've learned something new. Right now, I'm reading this book on sleep, which I think is fascinating. And it was really ironic because I'm reading and it's talking about how detrimental caffeine is to your sleep as I'm drinking coffee. And I was like kind of feeling bad at the same time, but then also, addicted to coffee. But read a couple pages, feel like I'm learning something, and then start with 3 things that I'm grateful for so that I can start the day off with positivity and then start my day. So I think that there's little things that we can do. It doesn't have to be like these big, grand things. Like, and it could for you, you're like, I'm going back to school, I'm getting my master's degree. Like, that's great. We can do little things too that help us to feel like we're improving ourselves.
Yeah, I again, that goes back to being proactive and doing things on your terms, right? Like waking up in the morning and saying, this is how I'm going to start my day. And if I'm going to do that, then I have to have the discipline to start my day maybe earlier than I would otherwise. And I think that's very beneficial. I try to get up early and get to the gym, and I find that it's really helpful with the stress, and helps me to kind of keep my mind focused on, okay, I've done this, now what's the next thing, and kind of helps my day go better versus when I sleep in and I feel like I'm already behind as you said, go and start my day by going through all my emails and jumping right into the tasks of the day.
Yeah, I am the biggest sleeper in earth. Like if you give me the choice, I will sleep in. And so it has been, I love that you use the word discipline because it's a choice and it's something that you have to almost make yourself do in the beginning until it becomes a habit. And for me, like waking up early is not fun. I don't like it. I'm not a morning person at all. If I could sleep till 8, 9 a.m. every morning, I would, but I don't because I've made it a conscious choice and I've created the consistency over time to get up in the morning. Granted, does that mean that like on the weekends I don't, turn my alarm off and sleep in a little bit? And, I think that we can have some sort of balance there, but I love that you use the word discipline because it's not something that just comes easy all the time. It's something that you have to choose to do every day. And I do think that there has to be a reason why you choose to do those things. And we have to have those conversations with ourselves, which means that we have to have space. If we're always distracting ourselves, if we're always busy, if we're always numbing out, we're never going to have those opportunities to self assess and to ask ourselves, what are my goals? What is important to me? And why am I getting up in the morning? Why am I going to create that discipline to go to the gym? Why is that important? And I think we have to ask ourselves why sometimes. And once you have the why, then that I think is what allows like the what to become a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the little steps or the little things. I think we need to be when we make those little steps and that progress. That should encourage us, and
Mhm.
we should give ourselves a little bit of credit for those things too, because um, we change a habit for something that we see as better, and it maybe starts out really small, but we should give ourselves credit and acknowledge that we're progressing and we're making progress, and just keep going from there. When you're working shift work, especially, it's really hard to find the time to get to the gym or to read a book or to study whatever subject it is that you want to improve on, because your shift changes all the time, and sometimes your personal demands on your time with family or what have you. There's another layer of with this shift work. I've got to find a way to balance all that out. But it's so important that you do that for yourself and you acknowledge the successes you are having, even if they're small at first.
Yeah, I believe in celebrating the wins 100%. I think we're so hard on ourselves, like when we don't do something right, or we maybe miss a workout, we beat ourselves up, but then we don't celebrate the small things. That's why I always tell people that when you're starting out with whatever wellness piece it is, like this could be literally anything, but start off like so small, like something that is so easy for you to maintain. And I said this earlier, when it comes to like mental health or mental attitude, and having more of a positive mindset, if you could wake up, and this could be habit stacking too, like maybe you're not trying to find extra time, but maybe it's like every time you're in the shower, or every time you're driving to work, if you can create the habit of just saying one thing that you're grateful for, get in the shower and just say one thing that's good, one thing that went well, one thing that you're grateful for, then we can build on that. Like that's something that I think everyone who's listening can say, I can do that. It doesn't take extra time. If every time I'm in the shower, I just say one good thing, we're all showering, we all make the time for that. Then we can celebrate that. We can be like, wow, okay, I did that. That's great. Then you start to reap the benefits of that. And then we can build on that. But if you set yourself out and you're like, I'm going to, every morning, I'm going to read a book, it's not realistic. It's not something that can happen. So, how can we do things that can happen and then build a foundation from there?
Yeah, and I love how you say to focus on gratitude and things that you are grateful for, because it's so easy when you're stuck to focus on the things that you're upset about. So if we can even just think of one or two things that kind of keep us going, it can really help us refocus.
100%. Our brains are wired to look for the bad. They're wired to look for negative things. And so, if we're not countering that, if we're not saying, you know what, yes, I recognize that these things are bad or stressful or hard, but there's also this other side of it. There's other things that are really good. We're only going to see the bad if we only focus on that. So, how can we counter that and start to bring more awareness to the other side of that coin? I did want to talk to you a little bit. I know that you use the word holistic to me when it comes to wellness, and we've talked a little bit now about professional development and how that relates to longevity and wellness. We've talked a little bit about mental health in the sense of like how can we be more grateful, or how can we try to have more of a positive mindset. But there's other things that you guys are doing organizationally that you found to be successful, and so I was hoping that maybe you can talk about just a couple of those things that you guys have done. And what are some of the results or the feedback that you've received from those efforts?
Well, when we talk holistic, yeah, it's a spiritual, educational, professional development. And so we've tried here to really focus on all aspects of wellness and not just one area. But I find that if you're looking at the whole thing, and the officers are just it gives them the skill set and the tools to navigate through the career. In Lehigh, we have a state-of-the-art gym in our building. We moved into this building in 2020, so it's still fairly new. And when we were designing the building and working with our elected officials and our city administration, one thing we really wanted to focus on was a place where the officers could come in and exercise physically, and also a safe place where they felt like they could come in at any time, 24/7, and exercise at their pace without distractions of the public or anything like that. And we also wanted them to invite their families or their significant others to come with them too, because sometimes working shift work, it's difficult to maintain relationships because you just your schedules hardly align. So we want to create a place where there's that physical aspect, physical training, physical exercise, great for stress relief. But we also wanted to focus on professional development and understanding what goals officers had and how we could help them get there. And then also the mental side. When I started here, we were a very small department and we didn't have a lot of resources. We had a lot of people with good intentions to help the officers be successful, but we didn't have a lot of resources. And one of the things we did is we went out and we recruited a volunteer chaplain to kind of help us. We noticed that some officers needed to talk to somebody, but they were reluctant to do so because they didn't feel safe they didn't know how to reach out, and two, they didn't feel like it was a safe place to do so. And we felt like what was missing in our organization was a volunteer chaplain that could kind of help connect officers with professionals and do it anonymously and stuff. So we went out and we found a volunteer that had a military background, a little bit of a law enforcement background, but just a good mentor that could help officers feel safe and also know how to reach out and get the help they needed. So that helped with the mental aspect of it. And we contract with mental health professionals, therapists, and people that have been in a law enforcement or public safety role. And then in addition to that, oh boy, physical, mental. I wanted to mention this one. I was at a doctor's office one day just for a routine checkup, and he had approached me and said, "Hey, I'm an orthopedic doctor, and I would really love to get involved with our first responders. I would really love to meet with them. You know, maybe one day a week during my lunch break, come down to the PD." And just be available for consultation and talk about, he said, we all have nagging injuries that slow us down, that maybe make us hurt and take our mind off of what we should be focused on. And I'd love to help, give back that way, offer advice, offer consultations, maybe help point them in the right direction to recover from some of these nagging injuries. And so, I was grateful that he was willing to do that, but I was a little bit worried how it would be received because it was a kind of a new thing. Mm-hmm. And it took a little bit of time for the officers to warm up to him because they're a little suspicious by nature. But he kept coming down to the gym and he would stay in the gym, and we set him up a station where he could, meet with them privately and just discuss anything they wanted to relative to their physical health. And over time, the officers really appreciated it. And pretty soon he was giving them their cell number and they were calling him for anything, for all hours and whatever it was. And it's just been a great partnership with him. And I'm so grateful that people in the community that want to see us be successful as a police department, and they're willing to help us get there by volunteering their time and helping us create this wellness goal of ours that really encompasses everything.
Well, I appreciate you said a couple of things that I think stuck out to me. One is, as a leader, you maybe didn't know how something was going to be received, but you were still willing to try it. And then you said it took time. to build that trust and that engagement, but eventually you got there. And I think it's a testament to what we were saying earlier, like trying things, being proactive, and then understanding that, maybe 100% of your people aren't going to use something day one, but over time, once you build that trust and you continue to reinforce these resources that are available, the hope is that people will start to kind of, jump on board.
Yeah, and that well, talking about that and being willing to be open to new ideas, I think that's also part of being proactive. Some of the best ideas that we've implemented around here have come from line officers, that they've come from civilians, citizens that have seen a need and they've offered to help fill. And so I think as leaders, we have to be willing to not not just say, well, this is the way we've always done it and we're not going to try anything new, but sometimes take risk and try new things. I mentioned I'm going to go back again to professional development, but a lot of our officers, a couple, for example, we had an officer that was really interested in a canine program, and not canine in the sense that you think of with narcotics and patrol work, but it kind of a newer thing, and that's an electronic detection dog. And maybe you're familiar with that, but they're trained to detect the memory cards and storage devices for digital evidence. And it was a new concept for us, but it was something that he had real interest in, and he'd done a lot of research and found connections and even grants and community donations that would help make this possible. And because of his efforts, we now have a dog that specializes in detecting these electronic devices, and it's very well served. It serves our victims of crime, our special victims, and it was all made possible because an officer wanted to try it and was able to find somebody that was willing to help make it a reality. And it's been it's been great for him to feel like he's contributed to the PD, and for the people that helped make it happen, it's made them really invested too. And we're one of, I believe, 3 dogs in the whole state that we have that capability, and so it's fantastic. And it's also another benefit to the dog is it's also a certified service dog that is trained to help people relax and calm them down, and it has a real calming effect inside the building when people have been traumatized. To have this resource because an officer had an interest and was proactive in approaching us and being willing to say, yeah, let's try it.
I love
Very
that.
helpful.
I love that story. And, that officer, now that they have that experience, I would imagine, as they progress in their career, they're going to want to do the same things. It's a snowball effect that happens. They're going to recognize that he or she had mentors that helped them to, reach the goals and career advancement that they were looking for. And they then will want to do that for other people. And so I think the more we can help other people, the more people are going to want to help others as well. So I love that story. I think that's great. This is kind of like an offshoot, but I was at a first responder conference, and they have their service dogs there a lot of times, and their handlers. And I went up and I was presenting that day, so I was very stressed. I had a lot of anxiety about doing this presentation. And I went up to this dog and was petting them, and they like put their whole body weight on me and like almost knocked me over, but like just kind of leaned on me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this dog loves me. I looked at his handler. I was like, I'm his favorite, right? His handler was like, no, actually, it's a trained technique that they know. It's called the weighted blanket. And so anytime they sense that someone is stressed or, anxious, they lean their body on them to give them that support. And then I looked at the dog and I was like, why are you calling me out right now? Like, why are you telling everyone how stressed I am? But it was amazing because it did work. I was like, wow, like I feel really loved right now and really supported. And it did for that moment make me forget about all of the other things and that stress. So I think it was really effective for me, but I kind of laughed with the handler because I was like, he's telling everyone that I'm stressed.
Yeah. It's a new thing here at RPD, but we're seeing the same thing. The dog just has that sense about it when someone's stressed, and they know exactly what to do.
Mhm.
So it's really been fun to watch.
Yeah, I love that. My final question for you is, for the younger generation, what words of wisdom would you share? I know we talked a lot about mentorship and helping people advance in their careers. And so what was something that maybe you wish you would have known earlier in your career, or something that's helped you along the way that you could pass on to them?
Well, one thing that I've seen throughout my career, and it's happening a lot right now because the profession is so competitive, as far as retaining officers, is officers will, I think, leave their organization too early to go to another organization. And so I always tell them, have that patience that we talked about, and take those opportunities to learn, and just ride out some of the lows and enjoy some of the highs. And over the course of your career, you'll find that you had a more successful and more gratifying career if you can, find that agency that matches up with what you want to accomplish, and then stay there and realize there's going to be tough times and slow times and difficult times, but there's also going to be times of gratification and great satisfaction and the opportunity to help people, which is why we got into the business to begin with. And if you'll be patient and do that and be proactive in picking your spots, I think you'll have a much happier and successful career.
Thank you. Great words of wisdom. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on here today and talking to me for a little while. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I would just say this one last plug for your podcast. So since being invited to be on the podcast, I've watched quite a few of your episodes, and I find that I learn something every time I watch one. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and I appreciate the chiefs that I've not necessarily met, but I've learned from them just through the opportunities you're providing. So thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And, um, you know, my goal was always to create community. And so I appreciate you, one, spending your time to do that, and, being able to learn from other people. But I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your words of wisdom so that other people can learn from you as well. So thank you.
You bet.